Well, I think this perfectly represents our foreign policy right now. Yep, as of course, that's my money, as the forever wars looks like they're going to be forever, as of course, that's exactly what's happening right now, as your money is being taken away from you and used as a down payment for the future of death and suffering inside of Europe. As the developments happening in that particular region are very tumultuous, to say the least, as it's pretty clear there's only going to be further escalations from here that are going to be bringing us closer towards World War III, especially in between now and January 20th, when Donald Trump is set to take office, as there's a concerted deep state effort to try to usurp one of his most popular mandates, and that, of course, is ending the war in Ukraine, which a lot of powerful people are doing everything they can right now in order to prevent from actually happening. Why are they doing that? Well, war's a racket, and that's exactly what we're seeing with the latest news of President Joe Biden announcing that he is sending an additional $2.1 billion to Ukraine. This as Biden is still on vacation and barely coherent, but somehow is still making very decisive, aggressive maneuvers inside a very delicate situation between the larger proxy war between the East and the West, which represents this larger class of civilizations. That truly is a very troubling development, as $2.5 billion is a lot, but it's not all of it. As Biden specifically said that this is for security assistance so the people of Ukraine could defend their independence and freedom from Russian aggression. This as elections, religious groups, and other organizations and political groups have been banned in the country of Ukraine during, of course, martial law, a time of war that the country is currently under. As, of course, it's more than just $2.5 billion that is going to be given to Ukraine, as there's other allotments, other aid packages, other government agencies even giving more of your money to Ukraine. But with this specific announcement, Joe Biden specifically is giving air defense munitions from HIMARS, artillery, air-to-ground munitions, Stinger missiles, counter-drone munitions, 155 and 105 millimeter artillery rounds, unmanned aerial systems, javelins, tow missiles, as well as a lot of other small arms, ammunition, and grenades, specifically to the Ukrainians that aren't losing just a lot of manpower, but a lot of morale, as a lot of people within the Ukrainian military are saying, hey, Donald Trump's going to end this as soon as he takes office. Why should I continue to fight for something that, of course, is absolutely unattainable, unwinnable, which is a question that we're going to get to in a little bit, specifically why this proxy conflict is continuing in the exact nature that it is. As some people are speculating, it might actually have something to do with, the Pope opening up 5 sacred portals and tombs underneath the Vatican. All of this as it's becoming harder and harder to get the truth out of what's really going on here, especially from the internet, as today, Facebook and Meta has announced that they're going to be generating AI users that will literally be bots that you will be interacting with in order to get better, quote, engagement. As it's more than just $2.5 billion, it's actually around $6 billion that's being sent to the Ukrainians. Very interestingly how they kind of covered this up, not to show the true kind of price amount, especially with how they're staggering a lot of these kind of larger announcements here, which essentially are meant to, of course, create perpetual war. As the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, is now also giving Ukraine an additional $3.4 billion in budget aid. As just a few days ago, it was announced that the United States was sending $1.25 billion in weapons, as they were specifically doing their best to get aid out before Donald Trump takes political office, which of course would get rid of his major leveraging tools of being able to negotiate truce and peace here. As people are saying, Biden is doing this when he's at his villa in St. Croix, as most of his presidency was spent on vacation. As clearly, this is not the man calling the shots here, and if he isn't, who is? As even mainstream CBS News journalists are talking about how his cognitive decline is absolutely significant.
Underreported. Jan?
Undercovered, underreported. That would be, to me, Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that became undeniable in the televised debate.
At the presidential debate with Donald Trump.
Unquestioned. And, it's starting to emerge now that his advisors kind of managed his limitations. It's been reported in the Wall Street Journal for 4 years. And yet he insisted that he could still run for president. We should have much more forcefully questioned whether he was fit for office for another 4 years, which could have led to a primary. for the Democrats. It could have changed the scope of the entire election. Yet, still, incredibly, we read in the Washington Post that his advisors are saying that he regrets that he dropped out of the race. That he thinks he could have beaten Trump. And I think that is either delusional or they're gaslighting.
President
American
Biden
people.
has said repeatedly he was sick during the debate June 27th in Atlanta, and he's always been fine, and he leaves fine. That is his position, the position of many of his top aides as well, even though there is that report.
What a sniffling little brown noser there saying no. Trust the lies right in front of your eyes, as the government knows what's best and as they would never lie to us, right? Yeah, right. As it's important to note here that there's a long history between the Biden family and Ukraine, especially when it comes to a lot of the corruption that has engulfed that particular country, as many prominent Democratic politicians have a lot of sons and daughters with a lot of very interesting business ties to that specific country that is known for its kickbacks and handouts. As this kind of additional military aid to Ukraine in the name of security assistance, as North Korean troops are now literally participating in this larger conflict, highlights a larger escalation here that I've been warning about from the very beginning of this conflict, as of course this tit-for-tat kind of back and forth maneuvers with larger aggressive moves being made against another country responding with even more egregious aggressive moves, really does highlight a larger kind of pathway towards utter obliteration and destruction that, of course, we're all paying top dollar for. Why are we doing that? That's something that, of course, on average, the American people do not want and overwhelmingly voted against during this last presidential election. And now, Joe Biden, on his way out, and of course, really the intel agencies and the really powerful shadowy organizations and groups that really do call the shots here, they're the ones that are usurping the democratic will of the American people and pushing through this aid, which they know will be very difficult to unwind, will be very difficult to, of course, recall, will be very difficult for Donald Trump to be in a position where he could say, hey, we're just going to stop funding you if you continue this war. That position, that power is now officially ended. As I think the larger proxy conflict that we are going to be seeing unfold isn't just the intel agencies versus Russia, but the intel agencies versus Donald Trump when it comes to trying to prevent him trying to be a peace president that will actually settle and stop this larger conflict and slaughter of very young Slavic men. Young Slavic men that have paid the ultimate price for what? As even major European media companies are asking if Ukraine could face another year of war, as this war of attrition has been a major war against the people of Ukraine that are dealing with significant resource shortages, specifically when it comes to manpower that is absolutely being depleted, as the Ukrainians have also utilized mercenaries and militant groups from Latin America, from Africa, as well as the Russians, who of course have similar very practices. But as the British Broadcasting Company reports, many of the Ukrainian soldiers are tired and exhausted after 3 years of fighting, as the Russians are advancing in the east and deciding to take more and more of the Ukrainian territory for themselves, as a lot of the young Ukrainian men are very uncertain about their faith, about their future, as Ukraine is even reaching out to Syrian rebels to potentially even seek a strategic partnership, as of course these are forces that have been aided and abetted by the U.S. intel agencies, as the Ukrainian foreign minister just visited Damascus recently, as Ukraine looks to strengthen its ties with the predominantly Wahhabist rebels that overtook the government of Syria, another very close ally of Russia that now has been absolutely defeated. As another very desperate and aggressive move being made by the Ukrainians right now, specifically I think in response to their lack of manpower, is them now threatening to cut off Russian gas from Europe on January 1st, as the Ukrainians have declared that the pipelines that run through their country into Europe will be cut off, as European Commission members are pleading Ukraine not to do this, as of course Ukraine also blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, according to the Germans, who had a major piece of their infrastructure destroyed, preventing cheap gas from Russia from entering its country, as right now the German population is dealing with significant energy prices as they passed Green New Deal policies that absolutely destroyed any kind of possibility of them being energy independent. They got rid of their nuclear reactors because allegedly it's bad when The science doesn't actually show that at all. They're doing all the crazy carbon emission stuff, which only tax and regulates and takes away more money from their citizenry. And at the same time, now the few pipelines that actually do reach into Europe from Russia are threatened to be cut off by the Ukrainians that probably will be making good on their promise in just a few days from now. As Reuters is reporting that Russian gas flowing through Ukraine is in its last day, as the Ukrainian transit deals is set to expire on January 1st, as Slovakia is now threatening to cut off Ukraine from trade in response to this larger cutting off of more energy resources from Europe. This as during times of war, there are always concessions to be made, and seeing the ending of this concession highlights very clearly how things aren't shaping up well for the future of peace in the specific region. Now, there are prisoner swaps that do still continue to happen during these kind of larger civil exchanges between Russia and Ukraine, as at least 300 prisoners of war were just exchanged for each other in a peaceful diplomatic show that does highlight how, hey, there's actually a room for diplomacy here, normalcy here, and trade, as a lot of war is predominantly a bargaining mechanism and a debate mechanism that is meant to spur on certain negotiations. This as these negotiations have a lot of foreign players involved in them, as the geopolitical future and the stability of the West still is largely in question, especially with very kind of duplicitous foreign policy maneuvers that do not benefit the countries that are involved in them. As when you look at this larger conflict, you look at this larger war, you look at the hindering of trade, of commerce, of money, who does it really benefit? I don't know. Probably some interdimensional death merchants out there that want to, of course, have their bloody sacrifice of the human spirit. Otherwise, I don't really see the reason for this. I don't see the logical, reasonable explanation to why we have to continue this nonsense. What are we set to gain? What are we getting here, especially as the American people that are footing the bill for all of this, as, of course, our money is being spent on a lot of this. The people of Ukraine, even the frontline soldiers of Ukraine, are being screwed over, as a lot of that money that their future children and themselves are going to have to pay back aren't even getting the full supplies that they were previously promised, as there's politicians along the way that decide to of course, take a cut for themselves, as the level of corruption in Ukraine is absolutely astronomical. And what we're seeing right now is just the larger selling out of humanity. As the power structures and the institutions of this world are being realigned here, we have to understand that when it comes to this larger disruption to these economies, when it comes to this death of the Slavic young men that, of course, are being replaced by immigrants and third worlders. These are significant changes that there's no going back from, as now one country will retaliate against another country, originally retaliating for another action, and the cycle of death and horror or negativity continues, all paid for by your tax dollars. As this madness has to end, and if you agree, share this video with your friends and family members. It's more imperative than ever. And to stay on top of everything that's developing each month, don't forget to get our Ultimate Conspiracy Calendar, available exclusively on wearechange.shop. This is a calendar that we just made. Get it before 2025. It's a great calendar. It's an awesome calendar that highlights an important conspiracy that happened every month of the year, with a little blurb, with a little picture describing exactly what happened on that specific time of the month that highlights something that the government says was not true at all, and then later we found out was absolutely true from the very start and beginning of it. Again, this makes a great gift. This is a perfect gift, especially if you're in an office. You could put it up at your favorite liberal woke workplace, where the people there would have to see, hey, this crazy thing that the government did against us that they said wasn't happening, happened on this month. Huh, interesting. So go out there, get your calendar. 2024 was a wild ride. Expect 2025 to be even wilder. I love you guys. Stay tuned for more here exclusively on youtube.com/wearechange. We return 6 p.m. Eastern on this channel. Subscribe, click the notification button, as we're going to be doing a live 2-hour podcast breaking down all the latest and craziest news developing right now. I love you guys. Stay tuned for more.